let's get into it with Northwestern. I'll go through the quick timeline, and then I'd like your gentlemen's thoughts and framework of what you think's happened so far. Back in November, there was a complaint. A whistleblower a player on the team went to officials at Northwestern, not as head coach, but officials at Northwestern, and had a complaint. And then I believe that Northwestern University began investigating this issue in January. On Friday, they released the result of the investigation. Not the investigation itself, but the result was going to be a 2-week suspension for Pat Fitzgerald without pay. And it was going to start immediately. And when you suspend somebody in the middle of the summer, you're suspending them basically for their vacation, because this is the one time when the players aren't around. So you're basically suspending them for time that they wouldn't have been coaching anyway. You're just not paying them, basically. But it doesn't really affect the team. One day later, probably about 24 hours later, the Daily Northwestern, the student newspaper at Northwestern, breaks a story from the whistleblower detailing allegations of what happened. Based on the report that came out on Friday, some of these allegations are not just allegations, but were confirmed by the investigators in their report. Obviously, we call them allegations because of the nature of some of the things that were in there, but it was pretty clear, based on the evidence that the whistleblower provided and the report itself, that some of these things happened. They called it a running, where they would, we won't get into the specific content of it, but it was hazing, and it was serious hazing of, I think some people would even say, a sexual abusive nature. And the president of Northwestern, who's the guy that gave Pat Fitzgerald the 2-week suspension, then said he was going to reevaluate. He reevaluated. On Monday, he fired Pat Fitzgerald. About 20 minutes after he fired Pat Fitzgerald sent a letter out saying that he has hired an attorney and he's lawyering up to protect his rights. And then the president did not meet, I don't think, with the team. I'm not sure if that was true. The athletic director did via Zoom. And the players, many of the players, probably not all the players, but many of the players are very upset. Here's where we stand. Northwestern doesn't have a team, doesn't have a head coach right now. I think the defensive coordinator is becoming sort of the interim liaison. I don't know if they've named an interim head coach. Northwestern is looking for a head coach. They probably won't be able to get one that they really want unless that guy is unemployed by the start of the season. And Northwestern's football players, some of whom are allegedly complicit in some of the hazing, are still there and not happy. What a mess.
Yeah, what a mess. Shocking. First of all, just, there's no such thing as the perfect coach, but Pat Fitzgerald was just perfect for Northwestern, and sort of this Big Ten model coach from a former player, embracing the standards of Northwestern, and
right.
The Big Ten cheerleader, Chicago, all that stuff. You just never know, boy. To me, there's two parts of this: the how this happened, and also where do they go from here? How this happened, I just from my seat over here in Omaha, 8 hours away. My impression of Pat Fitzgerald was that he knew everything going on in that program. He had his hands on everything. He was a small details kind of guy who was, a kind of a tough love guy.
Right.
And so I find it extremely hard to believe he didn't know anything about this. I will never believe that he didn't know because, and I don't know that, but just my impression is he's one of these coaches who's not a control freak, but a guy that knows every detail about the program every day, and he's He's got eyes and ears everywhere, and that's what you want.
Right.
I think Matt Rule is a lot like that so far. He knows everything. He's got his hand, So for him to say, well, I don't know, and right in the locker room every day and at practice fields, there's no way. There's no way he didn't know. So it's shocking he let this go on. This is. There, way back in the day, and maybe even modern times, hazing has always been around in some form, tying up a guy to the goalpost or some kind of deal. This is way beyond a lot of that stuff. So, shocking there. Where do they go? It's a mess. This is the age of the transfer portal. I can see half the team leaving, or depending on who the next guy is, or. You're right. They won't be able to hire a guy for a year. A year. After the season.
Guys who are unemployed
they won't
would take a job.
But who would that be?
David Shaw or Paul Christ.
Yeah. Would you bring Gary Barnett? Is he too old to come back and do it again?
Oh wow, I don't know.
Just as
maybe.
Just as sort of a 1 year stable.
Yeah.
I don't know. David Shaw was at Stanford, but this is gonna be a tough job, and now with it, we'll talk about this later. But doing away with the two divisions changes the dynamic of the Big Ten and what is expected and what you're able to do entirely. So, it's not going to be I think a lot of people are going to leave, and it's going to be a mess for a while. So. Do those guys want? Who wants this job? The facilities, the money coming in it's all there, but that stuff's everywhere too. So, it's shocking. Is all I can say.
6 faculty members submitted a letter today, according to ESPN, asking for the $800 million fundraiser for the new football stadium to be paused. And they also asked for the entire investigation to be released. And so I suspect there's going to be some things related to that, too. I think that the fundraising that was being done for the stadium, first of all, they got their practice facility 4 or 5 years ago. It's
gorgeous.
It's a gorgeous facility right on Lake Michigan. The stadium was going to be a harder event. I think you can make a really good argument for the practice facility. Prior to the practice facility, they were practicing somewhere that was like a high school team. The stadium that they're in now is old. It has a little bit of charm, and the new stadium is $800 million at a university that doesn't leverage state funds. So Northwestern does not have a huge fan base. And so I was skeptical that they were going to be able to raise a lot of it, even if he had stuck around. And even if he had turned the team around, and I'll be quite honest with you, I don't think he was going to do that. I think they were in a bad spot, and they were going to be bad again this year, 3-9, 4-8, and I'm not sure he would have been there after this year anyway. He might have been there for life. I don't know. I think it's very hard to argue 3 straight losing seasons when you're this far into your tenure, especially when you would be coming off a winning season in 2020. So doesn't matter. He's not there now. Evan, when you think about like the process here, I think it's just a reminder that even though the Big Ten sort of presents itself as I don't know what the right word is, a league of integrity.
Right.
Since I've started at the World-Herald, many programs have had really bad scandals in the last 13 years.
Right.
Terrible.
Yeah, the majority of them probably. You can go through the list.
Oh,
but
yeah.
The thing about Northwestern, and Tom asked it too, like, how could this happen? I think it's a very unique school within the Big Ten because it is private, because there isn't much media coverage, right? We're here at Nebraska, we're kind of on the other end of that when we go to practice and you've got 30 to 40 people that show up. Northwestern essentially has 2 recruiting sites. They have a student newspaper, and that's kind of it. when they had a Zoom call before the Ireland game last year, I hopped on that thing and kind of expected the Nebraska experience where it was like, well, maybe I'll get a question in. I got like 3, and the thing was over in 10 minutes. I mean, that's just how it is. They don't have a lot of attention. They're buried under all the pro sports that are going on in Chicago there. And so it's a very different dynamic than
It's a good point.
than malfeasance that might occur at a different Big Ten school. And so I'll be curious to see, how quickly they move on from this, because now they're getting national media attention, and that'll be there for a while. But there's just not the local media presence, which makes I think it all the more likely that it was the student paper that was the outlet that went ahead and broke the news.
Maryland obviously fired a coach over hazing allegations. DJ Durkin. I don't know if you guys remember those stories that ESPN had. Now, what happened as a result of that was at Maryland was obviously the consequences were dire. A player died. So, very different situation. I mean, this is also serious, but, Maryland, that happened there. Rutgers had sort of a situation where a bunch of guys got picked up or something right around the end of the Kyle Flood era. He was on his way out anyway. We don't need to reiterate what happened at Penn State. No one will ever forget that. Ohio State's had the situation with obviously Tressel, but I mean that's small,
quaint in comparison
compared to Zach Smith, the thing that came later with Urban Meyer, and Zach Smith being on the staff and all of that stuff. So you look at a lot of the programs, and Nebraska hasn't been perfect either.
But we have heard from fans, have we not? Harkening back to 2020,
yeah,
and all the flack that they got.
I know, and that was a whole different deal. But it does feel like a lot of the programs in the Big Ten have just really had those. Now, I think it's kind of true nationwide. I think it's harder and harder to have one of those jobs now, because some of the things that you might have gotten away with is the wrong phrase, but like some of the things that might have been routine within your program's sort of whatever you want to call it, identity, you shouldn't have been doing then, and you can't do now.
Right.
It's really that simple. And so what this means for that team, I think Tom brought it up. Northwestern was already headed for a really difficult spot based on the end of the divisions. It's not going to surprise me if Northwestern doesn't win a game in the Big Ten this year as a result. They will have their staff there, but I think Tom's exactly right. The portal will be open, and based on some of the players' reactions, I think some of those players will have spots they can go and will not want to play there. They just won't want to play for university.
They're mad at the AD and the president now for not explaining more, and that's another part of this, Sam, that I don't. I applaud the student paper. They obviously have a well-known journalism school.
They do,
and it's a kick-ass student paper. At a time when I'm tired of hearing people talk about how journalism doesn't matter and it's going away. I was not happy about this story, but it's a sad story in a lot of ways. But I'm proud of that, of the student paper for doing this. But why did nobody at that school get out ahead of this? Are you telling me Pat Fitzgerald the last few months didn't know anything about this at all? They just kind of knocked on his door last week, and what in the and
I think Northwestern's academic faculty is going to push that everybody gets to the bottom of what's going on here, and I'm not sure that Pat Fitzgerald will be the only guy fired.
Well, I agree.
Yeah, sure.
The AD might be next, and but to give him a 2-week suspension, sorry, I guess that wasn't good enough because everybody on Twitter said so.
Right.
It should have been an indefinite suspension. That it's always open-ended. Now, usually that means you're going to get fired at the end of this thing, but at least it's open-ended. You can at least give yourself time to get things in order and find out, what the heck happened and what you should, to take a little bit of a time. But this just looks like it's just kind of a Keystone Cops, deal. It's
Yeah,
we don't know what we're doing. We're doing,
Yeah.
So it's
I think the president will certainly be has a real challenge ahead keeping his job, because I think what would have changed in those 2 days? Did the investigators not do a good enough job? Yeah, I mean, I think there's going to be a lot from this, and Northwestern. This is a way of putting it. Northwestern is not. To be clear, what happened at Northwestern, allegedly, what's alleged, is worse than what happened at SMU. I mean, in a way. I mean, at SMU with cars and stuff. My point is that private universities this small are not built to withstand major cataclysmic departures of players. SMU never recovered from what happened to them. And I'm just saying, if Northwestern loses 30 or 40 players, it won't be like Penn State. If people remember, a lot of guys left the Penn State football program after 2011. Bill O'Brien comes in. He puts the names on the backs of the jerseys. I don't know how many scholarships they had, but Penn State, after O'Brien leaves, Franklin comes in. Penn State's able to rally from that. Alabama has shot itself in the foot about 12 different times with scandals over the years, but Alabama's Alabama. Northwestern is much closer to an SMU. This could be many, many years.
I totally agree. Coach Fitz was the reason that they've been lifted up, and he took over from
Randy Walker.
A 2000 Alamo Bowl. But it went from Gary Barnett to Walker to Fitzgerald. They've been respectable for a long time.
They have.
And now I wonder if that's going to go away. It depends on who they get.
And then the new portal rules. Technically, those guys can't go in the portal right now. A year ago, that was the case. You could go whenever.
A coaching change triggers the...
Well, yeah. But where are they going to go at this point? A month?
That's a question.
A month before fall camp?
I think
Can they insert themselves onto some scholarship roles?
So where does that go? And I agree. Long term, Northwestern was already looking like it was in a tough spot. I mean, a year ago at Big Ten Media Days, Pat Fitzgerald said it then. I mean, Northwestern was the last school in the Big Ten that didn't have a collective for NIL funds, because they don't have a fan base, whatever else. The transfer portal, much like Stanford, is more of a one-way street for that school because of its academic standards. So it was already behind the eight ball the way that things have been trending anyway, and now you remove the guy who has been Northwestern, the embodiment of that university for 2 decades. Who takes that job? How do you combat that just from a competitive advantage standpoint? I don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, somebody will take it, and they might do a good job. But you're right; all the other factors that go into this now, especially the NIL and the boosters, and when they were rolling, the Chicago Trib. You're right; they covered them. They sometimes covered them. Now they kind of don't, because the papers have lost their staff as well, and it's a tough deal being in a NFL market, NBA, all that stuff. So, and you're bringing in USC, UCLA now, and there's going to be more. And but the Big Ten is just it's been a strange place to be, Sam. It has all these things have happened in all these schools. Michigan State.
Oh, the Michigan State.
Iowa's had a thing. Michigan had a thing. It just kind of went away. And the Sheb backcourt, wasn't there something under it?
Yeah, there was
maybe it was another coach.
Like a team doctor. Yeah,
but it's
bad too.
But in any case,
sure, yes,
the
Michigan State scandal being related to gymnastics and other sports, somewhat. I don't know if it touched football, but yeah,
the Big Ten always walked the line between.
I know.
We're the higher moral ground, and
it's time to ditch that.
And
it's like a legalistic church, quite honestly, is the vibe that it's had.
And now the commissioner is a full-blown TV guy who's there to make him money, as was Kevin Warren, as was Jim Delaney. But you don't hear as much about the other stuff, the academics and the other high moral stuff, which we did when Nebraska wanted to play football. But that was more about keeping Nebraska down, keeping you in your place. They brought in this sort of rogue mentality school. Nebraska used to, the Big 12, Big 8, independent spirit. We kind of do whatever we think is best for us. And the Big 10 has always been this sort of closed, old world fraternity. Everybody wearing the same blazer. Everybody in it for the Big 10. And, so that was a whole different deal. But I appreciate people bringing that up. But that was more about the Big Ten alumni on ESPN. Trying to make sure Nebraska's down. Don't you want to be here? You can go back. Well, I had news for them. Nebraska never wanted to be in the Big Ten. They didn't. Nebraska wasn't looking to join the Big Ten. They're looking to leave the Big 12. There's a big difference. And they got in there and found we're a little different than everybody else. We're not changing. We're going to still be who we are. So that was a whole different deal. But
no question about it. I think the idea that the Big Ten is somehow above it is just kind of laughable at this point. We've seen so many circumstances, and I remember Lee Barfnick asking Jim Delaney at the 2013 Big Ten Media Days about all the scandals, and and Delaney's up there, and he's just like kind of starchy, and he's like, and at the end of the day, I mean, the Big Ten needs in some ways to clean its own house. I mean, there's just been too many of these things that have happened at too many of the league schools, and it feels like it's kind of time to turn the page. It feels like these have happened more in this league than in some of the other leagues.